It's a great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker. Our keynote speaker is Dr. Alka Patel of Lifestyle First, and she's going to talk to us about the principle of well-being for a business. Alka's a doctor, she's a coach, she's a TEDx speaker, author and podcaster, and she is a major player in the lifestyle medicine movement also. And she works to inspire individuals and bold businesses to create compassionate lifestyle changes to create a happy, healthy workplace. So Alka's very much in the front line of the well-being business. And I'd just like to welcome Alka and start off with a question of, what are the key principles of well-being in the workplace?
Thank you, Andrew. Morning, everybody. Morning, Andrew. Morning, everybody who's here. So I think to actually answer that question, what are the key principles of well-being in the workplace? I would really like everyone listening to ask themselves 3 questions. So the first question that I've got for you to ask yourself is, do I care? Do I care about the well-being of my workforce? Because that has to be the very, very first principle, doesn't it? It's to care. Now, I'm sure for everyone listening, your knee-jerk reaction will probably undoubtedly be, well, yes, of course I care. But actually, think about that. That might actually be your conditioned response. It might be a response dictated more by societal values, because actually we're supposed to care, aren't we? Every business is a caring business. It's not just the privilege of the healthcare industry at all. Every business needs to be a caring business. But are you? Do you really, really care? Are you able to say, I care, we care, with absolute honesty? So if you do answer, yes, I do care, then perhaps you'd like to answer the second question, which is, why do I care? You have to have a very, very strong reason to care about the well-being of your workforce. Otherwise, caring just drops to the bottom of your agenda, doesn't it? If I said to you, Andrew, me and you were perhaps standing in front of this burning, blazing house on fire, and I said to you, Andrew, please, can you just run in and grab my wallet from the top floor? There's a £10 note in there for you, and it's yours if you just grab my wallet. Would you go into that burning house? But if I said to you, Andrew, I've just seen your son on the top floor, you need to do what it takes to get him out. Are you? Are you going to want to run into that burning house? Same burning house, 2 different reasons to take action, 2 different motivators, 2 different drivers, which is why you have to know why you care about the well-being of your workforce, because undoubtedly your business will burn down without it. So that is the second part of this triad. Do I care? Why do I care? And the third part is, how do I care? So ask yourself that question. How do I care about the well-being of my people? So it's great that caring is embedded as one of your very core values for your organization. It's important to know your compelling reason for caring, but none of that is going to matter unless you take action. So what are you doing, right, that shows that you care? And this goes deep. This is more than just employee benefits. It's about reaching into the heart of your organization, isn't it? Its presence has to be felt. It's got to echo through your corridors. It's really got to touch the hearts of people. So I think, Andrew, those are my 3 principles of well-being in the workplace, the triad. Do I care? Why do I care? And how do I care?
And in your experience, are companies generally really serious about well-being in the workplace, or is it just the latest mantra?
Yeah, great question. Well, maybe we need to turn to some of the data to see what that's telling us at the moment. There was a recent survey by the CIPD, the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development, and they looked at health and wellbeing, they did a work survey, and it's pretty encouraging, actually. There's been an encouraging fall in the proportion who report that their organisation is much more reactive than proactive when it comes to health and well-being. So that score was sort of 27%, down from 41% last year. And 3/4 of respondents, so 75% in this particular survey, they believe that their senior leaders do have employee well-being on their agenda. And this is up from 61% last year, which again is very encouraging to see. But, and of course there is a but nearly half, so 46% in this survey, still lacked a formal strategy. And that's really important to think about. And of all the things that came up, stress, of course, came up as the biggest issue facing workplaces. Nearly 79% reported some sort of stress-related absence in their organisation. And that's the really, really strongest cause of issues at work. It's workload which contributes to stress. There's management style, which contributes to stress. There's relationships, personal health issues. And the other thing I think that the data tells us is about presenteeism. So being present at work when you're unwell, and leaveism as well, actually taking leave in order to catch up on work. That is on the rise. So I think, to answer your question very simply, are companies serious about well-being in the workplace? Yes. Are they serious enough? No.
Great. That's a great answer. Thank you for that. Now, you're involved in the lifestyle medicine movement, and this is dominated by professional healthcare individuals. What's the parallels to what you're talking about in that association, and what we're talking about in terms of workplace well-being?
Okay, so lifestyle medicine, if I just explain what it is, it's pretty much common sense medicine. It's self-care medicine. It takes us back all the way to the most important roots and causes of changes in our health, which is, of course, our lifestyle. And your lifestyle isn't something that you leave at home when you head to work, or you pick up at weekends when you're not perhaps working. It is part of you. It follows you everywhere. It is your essence, and it's actually what determines your productivity, your connectivity, your capability. So if you want a capable, connected, productive workforce, you have to tap into the lifestyle of your employees. The simple thing like sleep. Do you know who in your organization are the morning larks or the night owls? Because night owls, they're more productive after 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They're not going to be productive at that 9 a.m. meeting. Are your employees taking breaks? Sometimes we're so passionate about our work, aren't we, that we just want to keep going, or we're so pressurized by our work that we have to keep going. But breaks and time out, that's what activates what we call your default mode network in your brain. That's the untapped creativity and productivity connections in your brain. And things like movement, what opportunities to move are there in your organization? The simple act of standing, and I hope many of us listening and watching today are standing. The simple act of standing means that you have far greater mental agility if you stand at work. And the added benefit, you actually live longer. So this is how lifestyle medicine actually can feed into every place, every environment, including the working environment. It really just taps into what makes us human. And we need to do this for ourselves, absolutely. We need to be able to live that life of purpose and performance, but employers as well, they've got a responsibility to provide support in their organizations for exactly this. And this is what I do when I go into workplaces to sort of support workplace strategy and implementation, really helping you to tap into your people.
Alka, that's wonderful. Now, we've got two audiences here. One are in incentive management, looking at employee engagement, motivation, reward, and incentives. And we've got another audience which is about they're either providers of well-being, they are well-being experts, they are volunteer champions in industry, or they are practitioners. Now, given that the incentive side are really looking to get three things, I think, probably from this session. One is they want to know how can they benefit as an organization personally. Also, what lifestyle well-being type products can they add in to their reward programs? Can they get new content. And then finally, they're dealing with the person that used to be called the reward and benefits manager in a business. Now, suddenly overnight, they're now called reward and benefits and well-being managers, but it's the same people. So can our members sell to those same people? So what's useful to know is if there were 3 criteria for making a success of a well-being program, what would those 3 criteria be?
Okay, so just thinking about the audience, then I think again it comes back to what I like to call the 3 C's. So those 3 C's for me are compassion, connection, and customization. So we're all innately compassionate. It's how Homo sapiens has actually evolved to take care of each other and to take action to alleviate that suffering. That is exactly how we survived in our caves and in our tribes, by looking out for each other. So you can create a lot more compassion through connection. So if you imagine, walking into wood and you see all the roots of these multiple trees on the ground, all different sizes and shapes, they're all intertwined at that root level, at that ground level, aren't they? And so that's really important. That's how everyone's communicating, by connecting. And it's that two-way street. You have to be able to allow employees to share what they need and employers to know what's going on. And once there's that compassionate connection in your organization, that's when you begin the job of customization. And this is about knowing, again, your people, connecting with your people, getting data, because without data, you don't have direction. You can't change what you can't measure. So putting in the interventions that we know are needed relies on an important measure of the starting point and the measure of the impact. So I really strongly suggest using data to create a workplace wellbeing strategy that is really very unique to you, your organizations, your employees, to what you're providing as well. You've got to have a variety of offerings because everything is so unique.
We've got quite a number of business owners on the call who are C-suite executives or co-owners of their businesses in different geographies. Where can they start about implementing a wellbeing program? Where's a good place to start?
So I would say, Andrew, to start with a workplace wellbeing strategist. So there are people like me and many others who will come and take a pulse check of your organization. They'll take a temperature check. They'll check on the vital signs of your organization. And then people like me or others who've got tools to give you the data that really captures that essence and that impact of the well-being of your organization at every level, at leadership level, at senior management, at teams, at individuals. And then begins that implementation. So this is where you need to seek credible interventions and really kind of important to kind of source those out. So certainly the work that you're doing, the Workplace Wellbeing Association, that's the place to find credible interventionists, credible providers who we know they're going to have impact when they go in. So I think the key thing really is to start with a strategy that's based on data, seek credible providers from credible associations and pull together all those providers, because it's never going to be one person comes in and fixes everything. It really is thinking about your medley, your menu of provision.
So like many things in business, it's about leveraging a partner network and working with experts. And particularly when it comes to selling your first few programs, you'd want to partner with an organization that could help you as a subject matter expert. That would work well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a very, very noisy space, isn't it? Wellbeing and workplace wellbeing. There's a whole tsunami of information. But for you to be able to surf the waves, absolutely connect with the right organizations that can help you to do that.
Thank you so much, Alka. That was a fantastic keynote, and you cover some fantastic information there across a broad range. And you'll be joining us for the cross panel session in a few minutes after our other panelists have spoken. And so thank you so much. And I'd like to move on now and introduce Angela. Angela is the founder of one of the UK's most successful corporate wellbeing programs. And she is also very much crossing over into the incentive space because she's on the judging panel for the forthcoming incentive awards, and will be issuing an opinion on the first Wellbeing Program Award that the award program is going to have, and Angela will be making a comment on that. So Angela, welcome to you.
Thanks, Andrew. It's great to be here, and hello everyone.
So Angela specializes in nutrition-centered workplace well-being. And after a 15-year corporate career, she realized how unhealthy her lifestyle was. And she decided to focus and retrain on nutrition, and she formed SuperWellness in 2011. And she's won an Entrepreneur of the Year award whilst doing so. Angela's passionate, enthusiastic. She's involved across the industry, and she recently launched a program called Super Champs, and that is a platform for these volunteer wellbeing advocates in large employers. So Angela, it's really great to welcome you. So really what I would like to go on and introduce the next panelist, and that is our Dr. Lee Williams. Dr. Lee Williams is involved as the Chief Revenue Officer of Wellbeing Index. Dr. Lee has been advising business owners and leadership teams for over 20 years, helping them think differently, and worked with owner-managed and name-listed and FTSE 1000 businesses, and currently is working with a leading measurement firm, Kaya Wellbeing Index. And we'll be hearing from Lee. Welcome to you.
Thank you. Morning.
And finally, as a newcomer to the moderation program within the IMA, because I wanted to be a panelist on this particular session, as well as being the facilitator, myself and Phil were thinking, why don't we get somebody else to facilitate this session? And the first person to come to mind was Rocio Libana. She is the founder and managing director of RL Consulting, a leading European gift card full service agency that supports businesses across strategic and operational aspects of gift cards. Rocio, I've known her for over 6 years when she was at Zalando, the department, the retailer, and with over 14 years of experience. And also Rocio's a key founder of the Women in Incentives Network. And it's a great pleasure to have you on board. And I'd really like to hand over to you now, Rocio, you'll take on the moderating of the rest of the session. So Rocio, welcome, over to you.
Thank you so much, Andrew. And it's a pleasure to be here today and to moderate the panel. And of course, I have a few questions for our great panelists today. And I would like to start with Angela. So Angela, first it comes to your questions. I would like to know what is, from your point of view, the main elements of implementing a successful wellbeing program in a company?
Yeah, sure. So that's a really great question, Rocio. So I think across all the clients that we've worked with, when it comes to making a wellbeing program successful, in other words, building engagement, making a tangible difference, excuse me, we've found that there's a combination of different factors. There's not one single, secret recipe. And actually, we've identified 6 factors, and we've given them an acronym, which we've named it IMPACT. And so to describe them briefly, the first one is that a wellbeing program really needs to be inclusive and diverse. And that's both in the methods of delivery, so that you're reaching as many people as possible, whether they're field-based or office-based, for example, but also in content. And it's really important to engage different groups of employees. And some of the topics that we've found have been particularly successful recently, for example, have been things like men's health, women's health, menopause, and then you've also got different age groups. So for instance, the topic we introduced this year was around eco-friendly eating, and that's been really popular with the younger generations of employees in the workplace. The second principle or factor that we've found has been really about measurable outcomes. So a program really needs this measurement in order to be successful. And that's whether it's on measuring the benefits that it's having on individual health, or measurements more on an organizational level, like employee turnover or sickness absence, for example. Then the third one we found is really planning, and it's really important to plan your wellbeing program over the long term. We've really found that engagement is something that builds over time. And so there's always that, group of employees within any organization that's going to be resistant to wellbeing activities. It might not be right for them right now if you're running a wellbeing week or a single initiative. So if your program's providing a drip feed of content over time, then you'll be in a much better position to engage people much more widely. Then the fourth factor we found is that a program really needs to be accessible and fun even. So no one likes to be preached at, or told what to do. So it's really important to approach it with humor, a down-to-earth approach. And, I think about an example of a client we worked with in the rail construction industry. And actually before visiting the site, we ran a survey to find out the perception, what people felt about having nutritionists coming on site. And we found that 40% of the workforce on that site were against having nutritionists coming on site.
Interesting.
So luckily the organisation went ahead, we ran the sessions, and that gave them an opportunity to really get a taste for how we worked. They realised that it was the programme would involve quite a bit of fun, competitive elements, and it would be fun to participate alongside colleagues. So in the end, we had these, a majority actually of the workforce on site who joined the programme, and we saw some really major transformations. But I can assure you that if it hadn't had that fun element, we just wouldn't have broken through. Then the fifth element is really about being champion-led. And wellbeing champions, we find they're often the missing link when it comes to building engagement more widely. So they're in a better position to identify the real needs of the workforce and break down barriers to engagement. So that's really important to have them in place. And then finally, the sixth factor we found is really around tailoring and having implementing your program in a tailored way, because no two workplaces are the same. And in terms of tailoring, I think one of the most extreme examples we've had is working on board ferries, with P&O ferries crossing the channel, and having delivering a program entirely paper-based. So the workforce, the crews were unconnected, and so everything was adapted to paper-based comms, and the sessions had to fit around the crossings. So we realised, for example, that our body composition testing machines didn't work, mid-channel, so you had to run them in port. So it was really adapting around that particular workplace.
Nice, thank you so much. I want to pick on one of the elements that you just shared with us, is the role of a well-being champion. And I wonder, what do they play? What's the role they play in delivering a top program?
Yeah, sure. So I think when wellbeing programs are introduced from above, it can be a struggle to get that wide engagement, and the missing link often is the wellbeing champions. Mm-hmm. So when people see a colleague leading by example, because they're interested in wellbeing, that it's coming from an authentic place, then that will get perhaps more attention than an email from HR, for instance. So it's really powerful for breaking down barriers for people who are generally resistant to wellbeing initiatives. They'll be more likely to open up to a colleague if they have certain reservations around taking part in an initiative, which otherwise they just wouldn't have participated. We wouldn't have heard why. And then you can have a formal conversation and, break down those barriers.
Yeah, interesting. Great. I have one last question for you. Obviously, I think what a company wishes when implementing a well-being program is to have a long-lasting and successful program. So what will be the key to success long-term?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think beyond those 6 factors that I mentioned earlier, it's really essential to have backing from senior management, I would say, and if you want to ensure that success in the long term. So the aim of a long-term program should really be a shift in the culture of the organization. So this means that well-being becomes a priority, managers buy into its benefits, and they're not just paying lip service to it. So for this to happen, it's really important that the senior leaders are clearly endorsing it, that they're allocating resources to it, and that they're building well-being into the overall objectives of the organization. So, and it's great, you know, when the impetus comes from the top, right from the start, but often that's not the case. Often initially it's going to be championed by HR or even by an individual who's going to take the first step and demonstrate the value, perhaps by introducing a small initiative. And then when they see the results, the senior team will come on board with it. I mean, I saw an example of this recently with a client who had really been struggling to get the wellbeing comms across. You know, they were just kind of drowned out by all the different corporate emails and the updates. And then eventually the CEO gave her a 10-minute slot on his monthly CEO briefing. And that was a game changer. You know, that's when she started to really see a difference and get more traction.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Angela. And we'll come back to you in a few minutes. And now I would like to continue with our next panelist, which is Andrew Wilmot. So Andrew, again, thank you for having me here today. I have a few questions for you, and maybe I would like to start by obviously introducing you. So you are a portfolio CTO, chairman of P92, as we all know, and you recently also won the IMA President Award last year. So congratulations for the great work that you have done for IMA. And now you are co-chairing the Wellbeing Association. So tell me a little bit about that. How did you connect the dots now with well-being?
Well, I was in a joint venture with P92, and 3 years ago they bought me out, and I had an earn-out period, and part of the arrangement was I would work a lesser number of days a week. So I started going back to my first job after university, which was teaching transcendental meditation. And I really did this as a hobby. And I ran programs in major corporations, a global paint company, global confectionery company, and saw what really good results we were getting there. And so what I really wanted to do is to create a forum where wellbeing experts could come together, rather like we have within the IMA. And by collaborating together with your theoretical competitors, you actually broaden the market, make a bigger marketplace. And like with the IMA, we build some fantastic partnerships so that when a specialist opportunity comes up, we can do that. So I think the workplace right now needs a great deal of support from the perspective of well-being, and the idea of the association is not to focus on all of well-being, but on helping companies implement strategy, improve the delivery of programs, and measure the outcomes. And those are the three areas of scope for our association.
Interesting, thank you. And I like to connect a bit maybe connect well-being with business opportunities. And of course, I guess many of our the people who join us today want to know how can they best approach selling well-being programs to corporate. Do you have any tips for us?
Well, the easy ones are having well-being content within your portfolio of content, but in terms of how to sell the programs in, I think one of the things about well-being, if you find a change going on within a company, an issue that the leadership has, and you lay your stall out to them, you don't actually have to sell anything, that they want what you have. So the focus should really be at leveraging the existing relationships you have in a corporation, maybe in an adjacent space, and identify where are you in well-being, what are you trying to do, what are your goals, what are your, have you got issues around staff turnover, staff retention, how are you tackling staff recruitment, and how's that going? And then you dovetail and building on what Alka said, is you customize a solution for them that actually really supports their existing corporate goals.
Interesting. My last questions to you will be, what is, from your point of view, the single most important element for choosing the sale of a program?
Sorry, Rossio, I just had a bit of interference on the line.
Yeah,
do you mind saying that again?
Sure.
Yeah.
I would like to know what is, from your point of view, the single most important element for choosing the sale of a well-being program.
It's really about understanding the client's goals, and that's where you'd start. So Alka was saying that an organization, they would start their well-being organization by bringing in an outside expert to advise them on where they are and perform a bit of a benchmark. And a lot of companies say we have a well-being program, but what they mean is they have a masseur come in on a Friday afternoon, and that's not really a well-being program. So you need to understand what they're trying to do, and it might be a program about supporting young people in the workplace. It might be around apprenticeship programs. It might be about new graduates. Largely, my experience is where corporates have bought programs is where there's been some corporate re-engineering, where channels of distribution have been completely changed, and that what people have relied on as an organization to sell through has changed, or there's been a merger where two organizations have come together and people have gone through a process of trying to get a job in the new organization, and they find that very stressful. So I would say that the most important thing is to identify one of these challenges, and some companies are just looking for something that would help them build the resilience of their teams. And it's well-being really fits into that really well, making people strong, resilient, and able to sustain the stress they expose. And what is most stressful for somebody is not knowing what's going on in their organization. It's actually not about being overworked. It's actually about not being engaged by the employer. So you can't have real employees without a well-being program.
Yeah, interesting. Thanks for sharing. And I will be coming back to you again in a few minutes after introducing and asking a few questions to our last panelist of today, Dr. Lee Williams. Thanks for joining us today. I also have a few questions for you. And of course, I would love to understand what is the importance of measuring in a well-being program.
Good morning. Yes, measurement's vital. Otherwise, it can feel like you're playing a game of whack-a-mole with employee well-being. When you visit a doctor, they take quantitative and qualitative data to determine our well-being. And I think if we're going to look at successful businesses in coming years, I think those businesses that succeed will be the ones that have delivered employee wellbeing programs successfully, and perhaps employee wellbeing may well be the single biggest driver of organizational success in 21 and 22. I mean, to demonstrate improved employee wellbeing, we need to understand the individual employee wellbeing challenges. I mean, after all, wellbeing is idiosyncratic. The challenge is, how do we measure it at the individual level? The brilliant management theorist Peter Drucker has been credited with saying what gets measured gets managed. And although he actually didn't say it, it does embody that measurement management mantra. However, it's also been argued that not everything that matters can be measured, and not everything that can be measured actually matters. So why is it important when considering measurement in a wellbeing program? Well, one of the considered benefits of improved employee wellbeing has been a reduction in, say, absenteeism. This negative correlation between well-being and absence has resulted in attendance levels acting as a proxy for well-being improvements. Well-being improves, attendance improves. However, we also know presenteeism drives a reduction in well-being. So if attendance levels increase, can we really attribute this to improvements in well-being? With sort of post-pandemic economic costs of well-being being £2 billion a day, if not more, it's something we need to measure. It's vital. And that's where Kaya, who I'm working with at the moment, can help organisations by providing a simple quantitative wellbeing baseline based on both quantitative and qualitative data that highlights wellbeing challenges at the individual level so that corrective interventions can be applied. Programs are great at having the ability to provide solutions, but you've got to get those solutions to the right people at the right time. And that's the real challenge. And then ultimately, you need to be able to measure that it's working.
Great, thank you. Thanks for that, and totally agree. I would like to go back to a point that came up earlier, and it's about employee engagement and well-being. What's the real link between the two?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to follow on from Alka's sort of care reference, and I use the CARE acronym to demonstrate the link between well-being and employee engagement. C for me, step 1, stands for connect. So organisations who are not connected to their employees find their opportunity for well-being and engagement improvement, extremely limited, if not impossible. Over the last 10 years, I've worked with businesses that are highly connected, and I've also worked with businesses that are highly disconnected. And these generally are manifested by organisations with simple employment contracts, with draconian rules to implement sort of coercive management styles to keep employees focused on work. And engage businesses overcome challenges, of things like digital disconnection. So the first thing really is if you're not connected, then you've got no hope. But the second bit, and this is really where the well-being piece comes in, is this assurance of well-being. So Sept 2 is really assurance of well-being. And it may be a truism that employees are people, but this means that they're more than a resource, and people have needs. If we want to engage with them, we must assure that their physical, security, social esteem, and cognitive needs are met. Otherwise, they'll be distracted. They'll be engaged in meeting these specific needs and ultimately disengaged from work. And so engagement's achieved when employees are actively sort of seeking to meet their cognitive needs. And the question is, in organisations, how many employees have challenges to their physical needs, their social needs, etc. And do we really address those at the individual level? Now obviously for the colleagues with regards to reward and recognition and benefits, many businesses invest heavily in reward and recognition platforms as a way of driving engagement. I call this third base really, and quite often we start at third base and we miss the connect and the assure piece. And benefit platforms work extremely well. They identify individuals to reward them and recognise them. And sometimes, it can be a high-tech solution, but it can also be a thank you, a smile, and a hello. And so we need to be benevolent. We need to reward. So stage 3 really is reward. And the final element, the E, it stands for engagement. And if you have a successfully passed through the first 3 stages, it gives you a great opportunity to engage in employees. And so for me, if you want to engage with your employees, you need to have a care strategy, and you need to have actually a disengagement focus first. How do you disengage people from the challenges of life so they can bring themselves to work? And that's how I would link well-being to engagement.
Interesting. Thank you so much. Good. So thank you all for answering my first questions. And I would like now to start our panel discussion and open more questions to the floor. So of course, everyone who is joining us today, if you have any questions, feel free to add them into the chat windows. We will have a panel session that will take approximately 20 minutes. And I would like to, I was making notes during my questions and when you were answering. Before I start with questions, I would like to ask all the panelists if there is any topic that hasn't been covered and that you feel is important to share today. Anything that you wanna share with us?
I think there's lots we want to share, Rossi. Yeah. I think you need to throw up a few questions.
Okay, I will start. I will start, and feel free to, if you feel that there is any point, you can add it. I think we talked a lot, but it's important to spend a few more minutes in why do businesses need a well-being strategy. It's something. It feels today like it's obvious that we need it, but could you just drive us through your key points on that matter again?
I think any program, you need to have goals, and those goals need to be measurable. And you need to be working with the right people to deliver that. A lot of the change happening in employers is actually championed by volunteers. It isn't actually the traditional head of well-being, the practitioner necessarily, who have often come from a occupational health or health and safety background, and younger people particularly are looking for more alternative kind of well-being programs, which include things like nutrition and meditation and yoga and programs like that. So I think it's very good to have a way of selecting the right partners, but that selection is purposeful, but also employees can choose which elements of the program that they want to participate in. So therefore you have to have a strategy saying the company is going to fund this, we're going to fund that, we're going to start off with this, we're going to start off with that, and this is what we're measuring, and at the end of this process we're going to tell you what the results are. So the benefit of the measurement and the strategy is that you can prove the ROI, and so therefore you can get the money and the funding you need to invest in the right people. And many wellbeing programs are kind of DIY efforts from the HR department, and they aren't the best experts in the different disciplines of wellbeing. So there's a whole load of benefits in having a strategy.
Great, thank you. I have another question that I'm just going to read from the chat, from the question box. It is from Kathy, and her question is for all the panelists, whoever wants to take it. So do you have any example of a company that has implemented successfully a well-being program?
I'm happy to answer that. Okay, just to give a recent example, I've just been working with a health insurance company over the last 6 months, and went in with exactly the sort of things that we've been talking about today. Took that pulse check, got the data, measured sort of where people were at now at all levels, what the organisation goals were as well, and then engaged actually in providing a place for communication, a place to share vulnerability, a place for education and information, and what Angela was saying as well, that fun element to it, and then remeasured, and also measured physiology. I think we forget that, you know, a lot of us, a lot of what we do is very dependent on our physiology. So something like measuring your heart rate variability, for example, A, it's fun, A, it's really, you get really curious about it, and B, it actually is a very, very strong proxy marker for stress, which, as I highlighted before, the data points to stress in the workplace being really, really high. Now, the really interesting thing was the program was incredibly successful. I had drop-in with the doctor days and lots of really fun things. But what actually came out of the remeasure was a second problem. And what we found was that people who were still experiencing high levels of burnout, their managers, their management team had the most rigid emotional intelligence. They were the least flexible in their leadership. So the next program was to go in with leadership training. And I think you've got to start to unravel this. So when Andrew was talking about strategy, you absolutely need to know your destination, but you've also got to know that that destination can also change. And that's the importance of having that flexibility with your program as well. I think it's really important to measure, remeasure, and allow yourself, your goals to change, allow your strategy to also evolve and be really flexible.
Great, thank you. Angela, I have a question for you, and we got a question from the chat touching on the role of the champion. And the question is are they doing that on top, in addition to their job, or do they need to create a specific role in the organization to champion well-being programs? What will be your recommendation?
Yeah, sure. So that's a really good question. Excuse me. And what we find is that mostly, I mean, 99% of the time, the champions are doing that on top of their day-to-day role. So it can be really overwhelming. You know, they're trying to fit in this, what feels like a big responsibility. Often they feel like they've got the kind of well-being of their colleagues on their shoulders, you know, and they've got to somehow organize that around their day-to-day job. So I think my recommendation is really to, going forward for organizations, to really allocate time, you know, help those people manage their time and have time to dedicate to that role, and also support them with training, content. You know, it's actually, once you have a network of champions in place, there's actually quite a lot of work involved in maintaining that network, motivating them, keeping them engaged. You know, otherwise it can just sort of fritter away and you lose the benefits.
Interesting, thank you. I have another question. Maybe Andrew, you can answer. I wonder, how could we make employees aware that there are a lot of great providers out there and great offerings? So, what would be the best way to make those offers available to employees? Any recommendation from the panel?
Well, I'd really welcome everybody who's listening to join the LinkedIn group that the Workplace Wellbeing Association has. And if you need any help, just pose it in there. And what we're trying to create is a great community of people working in wellbeing. And if we don't know somebody, we can connect you with somebody who can do that. Over time, the association, as we build out our capabilities, we're going to have a curated directory of providers and experts that you can look at their profile and look at their experience and their skills and qualifications. And it's really important to have people that are properly insured, have got the indemnity insurance in place, and we're going to be stepping into that space. But obviously we're having to pace ourselves because we're a very new organization. But the simple thing is join the LinkedIn group and ask the question.
Great, perfect. Thank you so much. I'm going to go back to the checkbox again. There is a question from Brian related to the hot topic of the past 2 years, COVID. So how much of an impact has, all the restrictions, the new way of working had on well-being? Who wants to take that? Thank you.
I think the restrictions have changed significantly how people operate. I tested positive on Monday for COVID, so I can give first-hand experience at the moment of what it feels like. To be fair, it doesn't feel particularly different to any other day. But I think the real challenge now for well-being is that there's a remoteness that people have got to get used to, different media, friendships, a lot of social well-being issues that are going to become more apparent for employees, and the lack of interaction, as well as also the balance that companies will put on people to work from home. Almost an imposition. In the past, almost the perk has been to get to work from home. Perhaps in the future, the perk might well be to get to work from the office, to meet people. So I think actually, the snow globe's been well and truly shaken up in terms of COVID. I think it's highlighted people's health, both mental and physical, and actually the importance, and to take some responsibility, and for organisations to also support employees with that responsibility. But I don't think it's quite finished yet. I still think there's quite a number of things to play out as organisations return to work, as the sort of new homeostasis comes to play in the workplace, and people deal with working from home consistently and continually, and not having sort of family members there. Having been a home worker for quite a number of years, it can be a lonely experience, and even with video, it can still be a challenge. So yeah, I still think there's plenty of yards to go yet on how it works out.
Angela and Dr. Alka, I see you both nodding. Anything else you would like to add into this, the hot topic of the past 2 years?
Yeah, well, I actually came across some stats recently. I think it was CIPD was saying that, I think it was, I've written it down, 50% of employees were saying that they felt that their mental health and their physical health was worse as a result of COVID. That was quite recent, sort of after all the lockdowns, fingers crossed, were over. But then at the same time, there were 8 out of 10, I think it was, employees who felt motivated to change their lifestyle. So health had obviously really gone up the priority list. And that's a really kind of, a good sign that there's that combination. It means that I think well-being has its time now, because there's that need for it and people are prepared, ready for it. So
great, thank you. Good. I'd like to continue with the questions from the chat, and it is there's a topic about return of investment, and that's a reality. Companies will look into that when deciding if they want to invest time, resources into well-being. So have you been able to demonstrate the link between the allocating time in well-being and return of investment. Does any of you have a experience or have been able to demonstrate the return of investment?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the client and what measurement they're taking internally. So we've seen benefits really in terms of sickness absence, for example, but obviously that has to be measured, really precisely by the client, and that's not always the case. But we've definitely seen an impact on sickness absence, and I think part of that is really coming from the goodwill that it creates when an organisation's supporting their employees. So I think that really has an effect. We've also seen benefits in terms of reducing staff turnover, increasing employee engagement. We saw that with an accountancy firm that we worked with during the COVID period, actually, when there was a real threat to engagement and everyone was feeling disconnected. And actually their engagement statistics increased as a result of the programme and the different initiatives they ran. So.
Thank you. Good. There's another question from Wendy Carter, and it's about long-term strategy and long-term vision for well-being programs. Of course, it's a very hot topic right now. Companies are moving more and more into developing well-being strategies. But what's your point of view for the next 5 years? Where do you think we're going to be in 5 years from now? Maybe Dr. Alka, you can comment on that?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think we have to think about every cloud has a silver lining, don't we? And of course, the cloud that's hung over all of us these last 2 years has been the cloud of COVID. And, certainly in my medical work, for example, I've seen that huge rise in anxiety, depression, significant mental health issues, which have had massive impact on the workforce. And actually, interestingly, a lot of those stresses are arising from the workforce as well. But what is the silver lining to this is back to the questions that I was asked right at the beginning. Are employers taking this seriously? Yes, they are, because they have to. So that idea of that long-term strategy being embedded into workforces now has become a very sharp reality for everybody. I think that acceleration phase, we're on the cusp of something magnanimous. I think in 5 years' time, we won't even need to have these discussions about ROI and why is it important, because it will become so natural and innate and part of every business agenda. I think we really are on that cusp of that, simply because COVID has helped to drive that acceleration in this field, which was very, very, very much needed.
Great, thank you. I have another question for Dr. Lee that comes from Brian Dunn. I've just learned as well that your doctorate was on mental toughness. So I wonder if you could share some of the top lessons from that.
Yeah, so I think one of the elements or the characteristics of a mentally tough performer, be that sport or business, would be having a tough attitude. And actually, that's quite often a misconception when people hear the words in that people think it's about making difficult decisions, and sometimes it can be. But it's about making the right decisions as well, and about having the right focus on things like our health, and actually taking time to put our hand up and say, there's too much going on here. One of the things I've heard about recently is organisations giving people days off, or the whole company a week off. Well, who does the work while everybody's off for a week? And do you just have to work twice as hard when you come back? It's about striking the right balance. So I think in terms of mental toughness, there's lots of elements that you can apply to well-being. But really, first and foremost, it's about taking some responsibility. And the real challenge with well-being is it's our own, it's personal. But some people struggle to take responsibility for their own personal well-being. And that's one of the real challenges. So you might want to improve it, but if the individuals have no interest, if they want to continue to gamble, to smoke, to do things that actually impact their well-being, then actually that's one of the first things you need to address, is their actual mental approach to their own well-being before you can improve it.
Yeah, that's a very good point indeed. Thanks for sharing. I would like to go back to a topic that we just touched base, but there is another question in the chat regarding the measurement of engagement. And obviously there are well-being surveys, and do you have any other ways? So how do you really measure? I mean, we were talking about measuring, but how can this be done effectively in an organization? Maybe Angela, do you want to comment on that, since you were talking about measuring? And Dr. Alka, if you have anything else to say, feel free to add on.
Yeah, sure. So it varies according to the organization's measures that they have in place. I mean, what we as a provider, we provide support with, for example, a health questionnaire across the employee base, you know, and that will give quite comprehensive reports on even things like you know, happiness and motivation, and we ask quite a wide range of questions. So that's one way to do it, is to run surveys. I think a really good way is if the employer has in place certain KPIs or measures like employee turnover or engagement or sickness absence, you know, and then that's a real kind of business bottom line kind of measure.
Interesting. And maybe that is actually connected to another question I see, and you guys have talked about that before. If we don't engage the leadership, if we don't engage the CEO, it's going to be very difficult to succeed and to implement a successful program. Do you have any tips to influence CEOs and the executive boards to take this topic seriously?
I think it's quite interesting. I spoke to a chief exec of a large parcel delivery business just recently, one that people will recognise travelling around the country. And, you know, when I talked to him about what I was working on with Kaya in terms of measuring employee well-being, his initial thoughts were, well, why would we do that? But actually, we now can see, if you look at the logistics sector, you know, they need fit and healthy people, capable of drive. And actually, you know, one of their mottos is your brand in our hands. And so actually having people driving these vehicles around the country, be it, you know, small vans or HGVs, what you want them to be. I certainly don't want to be driving up and down the M6 with people around me who aren't particularly well driving HGVs. So actually, when I sort of pointed those things out to him, he changed his mind. You know, he said, actually, you know, you're right. Employee well-being is really important, and it's making those connections. That's all it really needs, is to make those connections to ultimately the bottom line performance, and it's easily done.
In a difficult sales situation like this, it's really ask him what are your headaches? What are you worrying about? What's keeping you up at night? And one of those things will be something that wellbeing can help with. And I think a huge issue for businesses across Europe now is recruitment, and also things like getting people back into the office. So these are the things that are on the mind. So it's really around throw it back on them. What aren't you solving? What's your problem? And then there'll be a solution in there that you can help with. There'll be others that are you know, the company's product issues, but obviously that's a really good place to start.
Thank you, Andrew. Good. So we are running out of time, and we are going to have to wrap up the panel. So I would love to just hear last recommendation from all of you. So if you can just take 30 seconds to share your final recommendation for the audience. So Dr. Lee, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. For me, it comes back to what Alka said at the beginning around caring. So for me, I think the 4 things to focus on are connectivity, assuring well-being, reward and recognition of employees, and then ultimately engagement. If an organisation can do those 4 things, then they'll be in a much better place. And I think the key thing for all of that, it's underpinned by well-being. And if you can measure it and demonstrate you're improving well-being, you'll be improving performance in the business.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Dr. Alka.
Yeah, absolutely. So of course I've talked about care and compassion, haven't I? But I think that the key thing, and we've all been kind of smiling through this webinar, haven't we, is to keep it fun. I think workplace wellbeing runs the risk of becoming a difficult conversation, something difficult to implement, something no one wants to step their toe into. But if we keep it fun and really think about non-traditional ways to approach workplace wellbeing as well. We talked about measurement a lot, which I absolutely love, and surveys and questions are great, but there's also some really exciting, fun ways to measure. And I keep coming back to physiology and biology because it is fun. People get really curious about it, and the more curious you are, the more you want to engage. So I measure things like people's biological age, you know, and who doesn't want to be younger? And if you can get younger and fitter and healthier at work and take that lifestyle with you through your home, through your work, through everything that you do, actually you're going to be more engaged in every environment that you are at. So I think it's really important to just keep injecting that element of fun whilst you continue to care as well.
That's a very good point. Thank you. Andrew Wilmot, what's your last recommendation?
In terms of delivering programs, the more senior you go in the organization, my experience has been the less interested they are in horizontal well-being. They are perhaps more motivated by personal improvement and performance improvement. And I think it's very important not to let wellbeing programs be bogged down in the mental health issue, because it's far more than that. And in terms of there's been studies done elsewhere showing the link between employee engagement and the profitability of a company. So some people are more receptive to the personal improvement message. And obviously, in terms of me being involved in the delivery of meditation programs into the workplace, we really would encourage anybody, and particularly the audience here, so if you've ever learned something, if you've ever come across a meditation, if you ever studied it, just do it regularly, and it's going to improve performance for yourself. And I think we need that focus on performance improvement, because I think that can make a really big impact. And hedge funds, for example, they put people on transcendental meditation programs to improve performance, not because of necessarily mental health issues, because they don't really want to discuss that. So that's a really good focus, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And Angela, you are the last one closing the round. What will be your final recommendation?
My recommendation would be to take small steps and build your program as you go. So don't get discouraged if you find that you don't get, company-wide engagement right from the start. That I've never seen that happen. It's really all about a drip feed of engaging content. Different people will engage with what presses their buttons, sparks an interest, but you need to build that over time. So we see people get discouraged because they've only had a small percentage attend a webinar, or engagement seems to be hard to build, but that's normal. It just takes time.
Yeah, that's a very good point as well. Thank you so much. Thank you all the panelists for the great presentations and for sharing your knowledge today. At least to me, has been very insightful, and I'm sure that the audience found it in the session as great as I did. Yeah, thanks for joining us. And I would like now to introduce Katie Heath, who will continue the session from now. Thank you so much.
Better unmute myself. Thanks, Rocio, for the intro. And just a quick word from me. I just want to say a big shout to Phil and Sean for having us with the IMA. It's great to be co-presenting together such an important issue. On behalf of the co-founders of the Workplace Wellbeing Association, thank you for joining us, everybody. We're really excited about the growth of the organisation and what we can achieve together as a growing community to really drive positive change in the workplace. So the key message, as Andrew said, is please join our LinkedIn group. That's where you'll find all the information about our website, which is almost live, the calendar of events for 2022, and the exciting things we'll be working on to support with the strategy, delivery and measurement. And that's it from me. I'm going to hand over to Phil.